Every now and then, a congressional hearing isn't just political theater. Sometimes it becomes a real stress test for the very principles of a democracy. And a recent exchange put those core principles squarely on the stand. So today, we're going to break it all down, moment by moment.
And that really gets us to the central question that bubbled up from this whole thing, a question that digs right into the heart of civilian control over the military and, well, the rule of law itself.
So here's how we're going to do this. We're going to walk through this exchange by looking at a series of escalating questions from Representative Jill Tokuda to defense official Pete Hegseth. And you'll see each question seriously raises the stakes, moving from corporate ethics all the way to constitutional duty.
Okay, so the first test. It doesn't start with weapons or military strategy. It starts with money, specifically with questions about billionaire Elon Musk's access to the Pentagon. And this really set the stage for a major clash over influence and impartiality.
And this is where Representative Tokuda really kicks things off. It's her opening salvo. The accusation is incredibly direct, that giving a billionaire who already has massive defense contracts this kind of insider access creates a totally unfair advantage and a pretty serious conflict of interest. So right here, you can see two completely different ways of looking at the very same event. On one hand, you have the concern that giving this kind of intimate access to a major contractor is just an obvious conflict of interest. But on the other hand, the defense is that it's just business as usual, a way to get valuable ideas for our national defense. The real question at the heart of it is, can you ever really separate a person's massive business interests from the advice they're giving?
Then, Representative Tokuda drops a specific number into the mix, $280 million. She pointed out that this donation was followed by billions of dollars in contracts from Musk's companies. Suddenly, that Pentagon briefing is reframed. It's not just a simple meeting, it's a potential return on a massive investment.
Now, the source commentary actually has a name for this kind of situation: institutional capture. It's this fear that a public institution, like the Pentagon, might start making decisions that are guided more by its relationship with powerful contractors than by what's actually best for the public. It's when that line between being a partner and being a patron gets dangerously blurry.
All right, so after digging into corporate influence, the hearing takes a sharp turn. The questioning escalates from a test of ethics to something way more fundamental, a test of constitutional duty, and it's all centered on the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol.
This was the next critical question she posed. Now, it's a hypothetical, sure, but it's designed to do one thing: find out where his loyalty would ultimately lie, with procedure and duty, or with the political leader of the moment.
And to really get the weight of that question, you have to remember the context. This was not a minor disturbance. The source material points out these staggering costs. We're talking about billions in damages and a very real human toll, just to underscore how high the stakes were for that decision to deploy the military.
So instead of answering what he would have done, Hegseth immediately pivots to what President Trump had already requested. And the source commentary makes a key point here. This deflection left the core question totally unanswered, and it really highlighted that tension between personal accountability and loyalty to a political leader.
And this is where things reach an absolute fever pitch. The line of questioning moves from a crisis in the past to a future possibility, and it leads to what the source material calls the most direct and frankly shocking question of the entire hearing. There it is. Tokuda puts the ultimate test on the table. Would a defense official follow an order to use military force against American civilians? It's raw, it's uncomfortable, and it's designed to find the absolute breaking point of obedience.
Hegseth's response? He just shuts it down, calling it a false hypothetical. This created a super tense moment because he basically refused to even engage with the moral and legal line that Tokuda was trying to draw in the sand.
But Tokuda pushes right back. By pointing out that the National Guard was already on the streets in American cities, she argued that this question about using military force at home wasn't some fantasy scenario at all. It was a very real-world possibility.
So you might be wondering, why is this such a big deal? Why is this a sacred red line in the first place? Well, it really comes down to a law and a lesson. You've got the Posse Comitatus Act, which legally separates the military from domestic policing, and then you have a tragic history lesson like the Kent State shootings, which serves as this awful reminder of what can happen when that line gets crossed. This is the bedrock principle Tokuda's question was really testing.
Okay, so let's pull back for a second. What does all of this add up to? Let's piece these moments together to really understand why this single exchange matters so much for democratic accountability.
You can really boil this entire hearing down to these three fundamental tests. Each question from Representative Tokuda was like a probe, checking the strength of the guardrails that are supposed to protect our democratic institutions from private influence, from political loyalty, and from the misuse of force.
And the main takeaway from the source commentary isn't really about a single gotcha moment. It's the idea that when officials refuse to give clear, straight answers on these core principles, it creates ambiguity. And that ambiguity can start to weaken the very boundaries that are meant to keep them accountable.
And this quote from one of the sources just nails it. The argument here is that the evasion itself was the answer. In a situation that really demanded a clear, unwavering no, the perceived silence or the deflection became the most telling response of all.
And that's the question we're left with, isn't it? This hearing forces us to think about what it means when the clearest lines on ethics, on loyalty, on basic rights are met not with a firm confirmation, but with avoidance. It's a question that goes way beyond this one hearing room, asking all of us to think about the strength of the principles we rely on,